Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This Is Nashville, engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. When it comes to being active in the music industry, there's not much that Rick Clark hasn't done. He's released albums, played in bands, written about music, and worked to select music for television shows and films. But how did this Memphis native fall in love with music? What were his inspirations? How did a winding road show him a path to follow his passions? I'm happy to have him here with us to learn more. Rick, welcome to This Is Nashville.
Well, thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you being here. So let's start things off with a bit of your music. So you wrote this song with your songwriting buddy and friend, Mark Marchetti, and you produced it, sang lead vocals, and played guitar. Let's hear a bit of Deep South.
I'm at the end of my rope, casting my last dreams on the mercy tree. Use a little hope to salvage what is left of the rest of me. I hadn't seen much of myself lately, and I don't like the little bit I see. I'm going down, even if I have to crawl. I'm gonna bury this seed in the ground once and for all. I'm heading down to the deep south.
Wow. Okay. Well done. That instrumental break in the song, it kind of hits you in the gut. It gets really moving. You get the feeling of like driving down a deserted road in this deep south. Was a road trip your inspiration for this song?
At the time that I wrote the song with Mark, I was playing in a band called Upsetting the Mothers.
Okay.
And we played all over the Southeastern Conference, colleges, universities, all that kind of stuff. We would, like, four of us in our sounding like I would pile into a rented Ernst Spensky truck and just, sometimes do a couple of 1,000 miles a week, just driving from gig to gig. And at that time, I was just sort of feeling like, what in the hell am I doing with my life? I was really sort of watching the years go by. And I was just going, I'm like going up and down Highway 78 in Mississippi, going to Athens, Georgia, going to all these places. When I wasn't doing Upsetting the Mothers, I was playing in bands and God knows where, throughout the Delta South. And it was sort of a song about, I guess, being creative and kind of having to confront mortality a little bit. I think that's sort of been a theme with a lot of music that I've written or co-written with Mark. So,
facing your mortality.
Yeah. The time... I've had a few things happen in my life where I realized that now is gone the second you say now. It's just like now, gone, now, gone. And I realized I had less time than more time left. And it just made me, on a very deep level, ask questions about, well, what's important to me? I sort of felt like, speaking only for myself, there's so many things that I've done over the years that when I really evaluated where I was coming from, it was from a need to be loved and accepted more than following where my passion was sometimes.
Mm-hmm. You say that creating your own music, which you've done since you were a little kid, gives you, quote, sustaining purpose. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah. I mean, I like to generally look at myself as just a creative. So, whether it's playing an instrument or throwing paint or whatever,
Yeah.
writing words, it's all sort of coming from the same place. And that's what nurtures me. And paying attention to the world around me and realizing that the world doesn't revolve around me. And the older I get, I sort of realize how little I know.
Mm-hmm. There's a wisdom in that.
Well, it's just trying to exist with some dignity and be kind.
Well, your path is a little bit different and unusual than I think a lot of people can understand. One, I think a lot of folks in Nashville obviously can understand what it's like to be a working musician, but I think a lot of Americans don't understand that. If they do the creative arts, it's more of a hobby, more so than a career pursuit. That type of career pursuit can lead to loneliness, being on a road, figuring out what am I doing with my life, because there's not too many folks who can relate, who you can talk to about the intimate details of what happens when you come to a fork on this road. And, you've continued to create music. While you do this, as you come to understand, okay, the direction of my life, what I've done, doing it with dignity, is that something that you're intentional about when you're creating your music, to put that in there?
I just want to be as honest as I possibly can and not have my mind to get into the way. One of the things I'm very aware of, I get pitched a lot of music with my music supervision and just all kinds of stuff. And over the years, I've had a chance to stand back, and usually I'm pretty good at hearing thinking in music.
Okay.
And I hear it in my music, and it's like one of the things that I realized over the years that constituted durable music was usually a sense that there was something at risk of being lost in the making of the music, what was the final expression. And by that, I mean a lot of records that I love, when I really look at them, the final expression is far greater than what the parts actually contributed. And it might be something that at any moment, if something had changed, the blood in the song would have evaporated. And I really sort of work to disengage myself so I can let my joy be expressed as unhindered as possible.
I understand what you're saying. A lot of artists, particularly younger artists, are kind of caught up with the final expression that they want to have on the album or project they're releasing. But a lot of people are concerned with, okay, am I going to get the views? Am I going to get the streams? Am I going to get the attention so you can make money to continue making music? How much of the business of music, how much does that interrupt the thought process of trying to have a full, honest, and what it sounds like authentic final expression of a piece of music?
I think when you are a creative trying to make music and you're trying to do it with your own voice, I'm not just talking about your singing voice, but your inner voice. I think the industry of music, the music press world, all of those things, you can get into drinking that Kool-Aid to the point that you start changing who you are in order to be loved. And that neediness, to the degree that you invest yourself in things that feed your neediness, I think rob your pure expression of what, of what you can truthfully reveal. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense to me. All right, so let's play another track. In this one, we can hear an unusual influence for someone like you who says they like music that's not too polished, that has a hair on it. It's got blood in the veins. Let's hear the track, a little track of Speak Your Mind.
right between us, and I know that it's not in my head. When we try to discuss things, we might talk about the weather instead. 'Cause every time I try talking to you, it's like talking to a wall. Are you afraid of what talking will do, of things it will recall? Come on and speak your mind, yeah. You've got to speak your mind. Come on and speak your mind, yeah. You've got to speak your mind.
Okay, it sounds so different from the other track. What inspired you to write and record this one?
Back in the 70s, I was sort of known as a kind of a tastemaker in Memphis among certain groups of people. I worked in record stores, had a radio show on WLYX in Memphis, and I was perceived as Mr. Cutting Edge Rocker kind of guy,
Okay.
And I just remember having a moment because I was raised before I bought my first rock records on Broadway music and piano music and all this stuff. I loved great melodies.
Okay.
And I just had this epiphany that disco was like the groove was a perfect chassis, so to speak, like on a car you're building, for these great melodies to sit on top. And if you did it just right, it gave it a lift. And I remember telling some of my friends that, I really love great disco music like Chic and Sister Sledge, and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's awesome music. Some friends just thought I was crazy. And I recorded that song, Speak Your Mind. It was one of the few songs I ever wrote in like 15 minutes. The whole thing just popped out.
Okay.
And I remember going into a studio in Memphis called Stairway. It was on Rainer Street. And I sort of snuck in there and recorded it along with two other songs. And I remember I hadn't gotten around to mixing it. I had a plane ticket and booked for Los Angeles to pitch this stuff, and I didn't have a mix. And the guy who worked there was the night person, let me in, and I mixed these songs in the middle of the night. Had to get on the plane the next morning, flew to L.A., and long and short of it is there was a guy who was a senior VP over at Motown. I forget his name now, but he started talking to me about being a staff writer and a staff producer for Motown. And I think there was a part of me that was either scared of success or scared of getting into a world that I wasn't quite ready for. Mm. And I let it slide. So Speak Your Mind, I had the master. I owned the music. And back in 2016 or 17, I went into Blackbird with the version that you just played. And I had, Steve Eby and Carl Marsh and Pat Buchanan and Allison Prestwood and just, like a who's who of amazing singers. Wendy Moten singing backgrounds with Serena Joy Crow, who was the lead singer who was on American Idol for a couple of seasons. And I love great disco. I just love music that makes me feel. Mm-hmm. I just want to be open. I'll take anything in, and I want to be nurtured by it.
You mentioned something real quick. I do want to get in. You were talking about writing, and I think sometimes for literary writers, they can get into a bit of a writer's block when it comes to making music. You wrote this song, you wrote Speak Your Mind in 15 minutes. It's something that came out of you. But have you ever been in that space of musical writer's block, and how do you get out of it?
Well, the week I wrote Speak Your Mind, I also wrote a song called Walkin' the Rails in 15 or 20 minutes too. Generally speaking, some songs might take, a day or two to write, but I have songs I started in the middle 70s that are still unfinished that I revisit. And because if I revisit them and I still feel something, then I go, okay, there's something that it's like waiting for something. believe it or not, some of my favorite songwriting is done when I'm taking a shower.
We all sound great in the shower.
I mean, I have my iPhone on a clip in the shower. And when I'm taking a shower, I just blab out anything. And it's, I always sort of find that maybe it's the tactile thing in being in a shower and the sound and how it feels on your skin that makes your mind disengage a little bit and just stuff happens.
Hey, word of advice for all aspiring writers out there. Bring your phone into a shower and make some great music. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue our conversation with Rick Clark to learn about his childhood and how his influences set him on a most interesting path. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP, and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
Look in the mirror, rub the miles from my eyes.
I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. My guest is multi-instrumentalist, producer, and author Rick Clark. The Memphis native has lived an interesting life full of creation and music. So how did his early life shape what he's doing now? I'm happy to have him here to learn more. Rick, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'm really glad to be here.
Happy to have you here. Okay, so one can really tell that your songs are deeply personal. You say the track that we heard coming out of break, Is All That, is a meditation on the passing of your mother and sister, which happened just 2 weeks apart. I'm sure that had to be a very difficult time for you to be so close together, especially your mother, who you say was an incredible, quote, an incredible ray of light and a major influence in your life. Talk to me a little bit about your mom.
Well, she was, if the glass was almost dry, in her mind it was overflowing. You know, she was a constant source of joy and empathy. She was a very good listener and able to read a room and finesse the best out of those around her. I remember when I was, my earliest memories, my mother would play classical piano records. She would play, Gershwin or Rodgers and Hart or, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Showtime music. I fell in love with music when those first exposures to it happened. And I remember our family got a Zenith console stereo.
Okay.
The big wooden things and all that stuff. And I remember when they bought it, the store that they bought it from had free albums that they supplied. And in it were, Billy Vaughn, a lot of Dot Record stuff. And there was a guy named Johnny Maddox, who was a ragtime guy, Dixieland ragtime guy. And, aficionados of real Dixieland music and ragtime usually sort of looked down their noses on his records because they were rather clean, close-mic'd, almost like pop records. Mm-hmm. But for me as a kid, I just really loved those records and started seeking out other music that was Dixieland and ragtime. There was something about the groove of it that really fed me. And that sort of led me to Sweet Emma Preservation Hall Band. I remember going to see them, getting their records, and other Dixieland artists and ragtime players. And I even briefly, years later, played ragtime piano at a what was it? It wasn't Shoney's. It was like a pizza kind of place. I
Okay.
played, yeah. It was, me and a guy on the banjo, and playing ragtime piano. But and it's sort of funny because the pocket, and for those of you that don't know it's a musician term, but the pocket, when people say the pocket is deep, it just means that the instruments are sort of feeling right in the sweet spot of what is moving the music. And in Dixieland and ragtime music, there's a kind of a push-pull, a straight time, swing time thing that happens that moves me in a really peculiar, kind of inside. I just love the groove. And in fact, when I started playing bass, years later, I would say ragtime and Dixieland influenced the way that I interpret a pocket as much as Memphis stuff.
Your mom encouraged you to pick up instruments and to play music?
Well, they got me an upright piano when I was like, I don't know, maybe in the second grade or something like that. I wrote my first piece of sheet music, which I named The Fog, and it was probably nothing but whole notes. It was very foggy. And, but I just loved playing on the piano. It was especially an upright that wasn't perfectly exactly in tune. There was something about the character of it that I liked. And, after that, I started playing a little bit on guitar, never got much better, and then drums and then bass. And, learned enough to do what I needed to do.
I want to talk a little bit about your multi-instrumentalism a little bit later, but your dad, he was a bit different from your mom. I understand that he wanted to be a minister when he was younger, but his father said he'd pay for college if he went to school to be an engineer. So that's eventually what he did. You were clearly wired at a young age to be creative, writing, painting, drawing, playing music. Do you feel like your dad let you be who you wanted to be?
I don't think he understood. And looking back at him, he was a very, very good man, a very generous heart, also a man with extremely high ideals that he held on to himself and also to me. And it's sort of sad to say this now because he passed away about 1.5 years ago. And that was something that I didn't really experience or believe that there was a deep pride from him in what I did until this last few years he was alive. And I put that on myself quite a bit for, just being distant, I guess, to protect myself from the internal, you get tools sometimes from well-meaning people that end up being weapons you can effectively use yourself, on yourself. You sort of pick it up by example, and after a while, you can be miles away from wherever you picked up that instrument or wound, and no one needs to do it for you. And so, I would say I spent a whole lot of my life trying to untangle that, through my music and through writing and art and, other things like that. But, it's the things that I realize that have been before me to try and solve are also paths that I've learned to give myself and others more grace.
Yeah. My grandmother used to say, no one knows how to push your buttons better than you do.
No joke.
Do you have children yourself?
Yes, I have a daughter, Sarah, and I have, and most people don't know this, but I had a son named Johnny, and Sarah is in her mid-40s, lives in Chattanooga, unbelievably creative, smart, just a very gifted person, multilingual. And Johnny was born severely autistic, and that was it's something, here I am saying it on This Is Nashville, but, it's something I never bring up because it's too much explanation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
That's another very deep driver in my life. So, yeah, and this existence is so priceless. And there is so much that I've done and not done, and I try to look at all of it in a open-hearted, forward spirit of thanksgiving. And I try to give myself grace for the things that I didn't have the courage to face. And I feel very deeply about owning the words that I say as unimpeded by my inner neediness or trying to prove something, to be as direct so that I'm saying and writing things that I would say to someone's face. And sometimes that other face is my face, you know? So, you know, I look at the paths that I've taken in my life. You know, I've had multiple marriages. At the time, those I was married to, I have no doubt they loved me and I loved them. And, you know, we were all trying to find our ways through what was important. And, you know, the last 17 and a half years, I've been with Mary Ball. We're not married, but she is like my earth and sky. She, every day that I wake up, I count my blessings that someone so amazingly perfect and complimentary to me is there. I can't say enough how much I'm grateful for that. And I would say that relationship has helped me return to the unfinished stuff and basically blast through it and find a lot of joy.
I appreciate you being so vulnerable and open with us. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekolona. We're talking this hour with music producer, musician, and writer Rick Clark about his life, his inspiration, and music. You said this relationship you're in with Mary has allowed you to go back to the unfinished stuff with a sense of joy. Talk to me about the wisdom that comes with being able to reflect and to go back to something unfinished that I might be assuming, but maybe you potentially felt ashamed about or just guilty about having finished, and now you have the opportunity to finish with what it sounds like a broader perspective.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing because I met Mary, and I'm going to sound like an advertisement here for a second.
Okay.
But when my wife and I split up in 2006, I was at a place in my life where I had been before, where I sort of felt like I was in a box, and I needed to get out of the box. And I made a decision to keep the place that I was living in West Nashville and basically have a second residence in Santa Monica. And I knew no one there. And so while I was belly aching about the demise of the marriage, there were two people that basically were very, very helpful. One was Brian Ahern, who is Emmylou Harris's ex-husband and producer of her great records. And Brian is a dear friend. And Brian said, whenever the name of my ex-wife comes in my head, just say L.A. And I got really good at saying L.A. And the other thing was my friend Steve Eby, who's a great drummer here in town and one of my dearest friends. We never see each other enough. Stevie and some other friend said, Rick, you need to try eHarmony. This is where it's going to sound like an ad, okay?
Okay.
And I'm going to...
It does work.
Well, it was one of the best decisions I ever made, okay? Because I met Mary. And at the time, I was so unbound in my mind, you know, like the whole world was out there. And I thought, you know, I'm just going to throw myself out into this place and, you know, Santa Monica and just relationships and everything and figure things out. And on eHarmony, you know, they want you to write like a damn book, practically. And, I just sort of wrote my so-called book in eHarmony like I just threw out all the stuff that might be cringy. I just sort of said, hey, this is what I am. I can send you a picture of me. You can say I look okay or not, or this or that, or, oh, he's a musician, or this or that. But I wanted to throw out all the things that I felt conflicted about or shame for or trying to work through and just get it over with. Just so anyone who read it would go, oh, gross, or whatever. And as it turned out, there were like 6 women that I met. All of them, except for one who went off the grid in Canada, I'm still friends with. Uh-huh. But one of them was Mary. And Mary lived and still does. I live with her in Columbia, Tennessee. She's a 23-year veteran school psychologist in the Murray County school system. And we just grew into loving each other. And, there were so many things that you just learn. 98% of the stuff people fight about, it's like, it's not worth it. It's like, okay, fine. Let's do it that way, because there's just so much more harmony and accord that happens between people when you just open your heart to that other person and they with you.
Amen. Amen to that. All right, let's go to one more break. But before we do, we're going to listen to a song by Rick Clark. Here's Crack in the Sky.
Hotter than the devil in the depths of July, and the clouds of sweat and tears, but the ground was dry. Under the sky's unforgiving glare, some children found a body east of Auction Square. Down in Hurt Village, word had gotten around that Ivory jumped bail and could not be found. Not long ago he was like a king, now his body's stripped of jewelry and his diamond rings, yeah.
All right, we got to take a short break. When we come back, we'll learn how Rick Clark found a career in music supervision and his work with the Oxford American Magazine. This is Nashville.
Galliano's good these days. Guess I'll stay in town. All these now special days, and I'm happy now that I found you. And I'll fight the interstate, work for my due, and I swear day by day, girl, the Nashville sun's gonna rise. I said the Nashville sun's gonna rise.
I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. That was Nashville Sun by John Buck Wilkin. My guest is Rick Clark, Memphis native who's done pretty much everything one can do in the music industry. He's written, performed, and produced music. He's also a music writer. So let's learn about what happened when he took his talents to Nashville. All right, everyone who moves here has a story. What's your Nashville origin story?
Back in the early 80s, my friend Mark Marchetti, who's married to Peggy Lynn, Loretta's daughter. Mark and I are just very, very dear friends, and he's really the only one since the late 70s that I have continually written songs with. So Mark and I, we were living in Memphis at the time, and we would go to Muscle Shoals and record. And one of the songs that we wrote, that we recorded, was a song called Hold On. And it was literally a song that we wrote in Memphis where the chorus just tumbled out in my living room. Literally the harmony, it just sort of tumbled out. I've got a cassette recording of it. And we were just trying to go get some beer,
Hold on, I'm going to get beer.
I'm gonna, and so anyway, the song tumbled out. We wrote the whole thing except for the last verse, and wrote that over the phone that night. Went to Muscle Shoals, recorded it with a couple other songs, and I shared it with dear friend, another Memphian who's had a hell of a career in Nashville, Gene Dries. Gene was really a major national music promotion, record retail person for Warner Brothers. And he was in the offices of Warner Brothers in Nashville and was passing this song around. From what I remember correctly, the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, I want to say the Allman Brothers. It sounds weird, but that was, I think, one he mentioned. And there were a couple of female artists, but Gail Davies happened to hear the song as she was walking down the hall and immediately put a hold on it. And she ended up recording it out in Los Angeles at Cherokee Recording Studio with a who's who of amazing players like Albert Lee on guitar and Billy Payne on keys and Leland Sklar on bass. And, it was just amazing sounding. And she actually the lead guitar parts were pretty much a copy of the guitar parts that I sort of worked up when we were Muscle Shoals. And the song became a top 20 hit in 1982. And that was a real eye-opener for us because I was just mucking around playing gigs in Memphis, and Mark was, at home in Memphis writing songs. And there was this one moment when the song was still sort of climbing the charts, and we were in the Warner Brothers office in Nashville, and we were asked to go upstairs to this room, and we went in there, and there was a record label person, and there was a person with Warner Brothers Publishing, and a couple other people in the room, and they talked about signing us as writers for Warner Brothers and also a developmental deal for the label. And it's sort of funny, but we walked away from it.
Okay. Why? Why?
It's just sort of, it's sort of the story, like the Motown thing I told you, where they talked about me being a staff producer and a staff writer. I'd walk away from these things that would sort of land in my lap. And I think Mark was I think both of us on some level were a little bit afraid of success. We're just sort of used to, embracing our cynicism and our misery, and so, there are too many stories. It's half a book of stories of walking away from things. And the best thing I can say is I have 100% of everything, which someone might say, well, yeah, you have 100% of nothing, like my disco songs or whatever. But it's like, I can live with that. I'm still standing. I'm 70 years old, and I have people I love and people who love me.
Still going strong.
Yeah, what do I have to cry about? I'm thankful.
Okay, so something you didn't walk away from. In 1997, through a recommendation by a legendary Memphis-based producer, Jim Dickinson, you began producing, co-compiling, and doing all of the legal clearance work for what would be the first 7 volumes of the award-winning Oxford American Magazine Music Issues CD. Now, that's a big, big deal. Some folks may not be aware of it, but tell us the significance of the Oxford American Magazine Music Issue.
To put it in the words of a friend of mine, he said, that is the gift that keeps on giving. Because beginning with the first issue, which Jim Dickinson, who is long gone now, but Jim Dickinson, in many ways, was a kind of a mentor, father, brother kind of figure in Memphis. There are many of us in Memphis who benefited from Jim's attention and insights. And Mark Smirnoff was the guy who started the Oxford American, and he reached out to Jim, and he said, I need someone to do this music issue, an annual issue, have a CD go with it. Do you know of anyone who could do this? And Jim recommended me. So I met with Mark, and, we started a run of we did 7 issues, the first 7 CDs together. And I know Mark has gone through all kinds of things. He's no longer with the magazine. He could be pretty hard on me at times, but one thing I would say is that A, he gave me a shot. B, I knew that the magazine meant so much to him that he wanted it to be the best that it could be. And we had an agreement. We were the only 2 people who had the power to decide what got on there. And if one of us wasn't totally on board, it didn't get on there.
Okay.
So everything that got on there was something that he and I settled on. And there was probably a lot of blood on the floor at times, what ended up on the cutting room floor. But he let me, sequence everything and suggest pieces, and he had pieces, and
it really worked out. I mean, it earned you quite a following. Folks like Sidney Pollack, Cameron Crowe, Dolly Parton. You even got a call on one Independence Day from a very well-known gonzo journalist, Hunter S. Thompson. What did he say to you?
I was up in my office just pouring on the hours working on music, and the phone rang, and it was this voice that if you've ever heard Hunter Thompson talk, it's this kind of clipped, slightly edgy thing. And we ended up, talking for maybe 45 minutes, and he called up because he was such a fanatic about the Oxford American CDs. He actually had a CD that he put together that he sent me with a real nice note, And
Hunter S. Thompson sent you a mix CD.
Yeah, he sent me a mix
Nice.
CD. And we talked a few times over a couple of years before he passed away. But, we would just talk about music, and we both were not fans of the Republican Party and George Bush, so we had a lot of common interest there. But I'll never forget, I was standing on my porch on July 4th. I forget the year, but it was the year he died, whenever he died after July 4th. It was like 5 p.m. My cell phone rang, and it was Hunter. And this sounds like a fishing story, okay? It's like I'm making this crap up.
No, I'm with you.
So he starts talking about, July 4th. He talks about this country as, that it really is a great place. And, saying a lot of things that a lot of people might think are uncharacteristic of the way he said, but he had a very sweet or a unguarded side that I've experienced a few times in these conversations. And he said, to celebrate this July 4th, we decided to listen to all, I don't know if it's 5 or 7, I think it was 7. We decided to listen to all of your Oxford American CDs in their entirety in chronological order.
Wow.
And he's told me about the songs he loved and this and that, and then he put his significant other on the phone, and she told me a few things about what she loved about it. And then there was a boy, a young man who, I want to say it was Hunter's, it was their son.
Mm-hmm.
They put their son on the phone, and he talked to me for a few minutes about this. And then Hunter got on the phone, and we did a little bit of just talking, and then that was the last time I ever heard from him.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are things that those CDs sort of brought into my world that I could have never imagined sitting up in my upstairs office in my East Nashville house. I was just
Yeah.
up there just doing my thing. And, like I remember one time Gus Dudgeon, who produced all the great Elton John records, called me up out of the blue. And Gus was sort of going, he only thought there was one CD. And he was just raving about it. And I said, which one do you have? And he said, you mean there's more than one? So he bugged me for about a month and a half until I made a set with jewel cases, a box set, and sent them to him.
Okay.
And we sort of became phone buddies. I never met him in person, but we talked a fair amount of time, sometimes for a couple hours at a whack. And he was a huge Americana fan. He loved Doug Somm.
People wanted your stuff. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekulona. We're talking this hour with music producer, multi-instrumentalist, and author Rick Clark about his life, his music, and his inspiration. Two things before we got to go. You've been a tastemaker all your life. In high school, you were voted most talented, which surprised you. You were known as the tastemaker then. You come out to Nashville, you're known as a tastemaker. You work with the Oxford American magazine as a tastemaker, which led to you becoming a music supervisor, which kind of feels natural in a way. You're choosing the right music to put in the perfect places for television and film projects. Briefly, how do you enjoy doing that type of work?
I love it. I mean, like any job, it's hard to call it a job. I mean, it's a lot of work. But still, when the stars align, it's just really, really amazing. I love working on productions that are period kind of oriented, or that they deal with special communities or certain kind of clear points of view culturally. So like the show I'm doing now is season 3 of the AMC Navajo crime drama, Dark Winds, which is produced by George R.R. Martin, the Game of Thrones guy, and Robert Redford. And it's an opportunity for me to dive in and I really love being in a place where I can sort of, I don't come out and say I'm not worthy, but I want to be taught. Mm-hmm. I like being in a place where I am educated. And so the last 2.5 years with Dark Winds, I've gotten the privilege of being able to speak with incredibly wise and insightful native artists that, and just community leaders. Like when I did the TV show Hell on Wheels, that was in the early 1870s, late 1860s. And I loved the opportunity to, learn more deeply about the Mormon faith and about the history of the Chinese and, the history of the Chinese and the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. I studied a lot of books. I even got to a point where I was making a lot of, additional music. Grantley Phillips was one person who I worked with on some of the stuff in this thing I call Deliverance Sisters. And there were a couple of short pieces of music that I even wrote for the show in Cantonese. And that was a real journey. But it was like, I like getting thrown into the deep end of the water and trying to see where our commonalities meet.
Yeah, it sounds like you were able to allow it to express your knowledge of music, but also swim to an area where you get to learn more.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's a blessing.
Yes, sir.
It's
been an honor to be able to talk with you. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go out with one more Rick Clark original. Here is In the End, You Get What You Love.
Oh, featuring Phil Madeira on vocals.
Okay.
Yeah, it's our upside down hymn.
Let's check it out.
There's a banquet, my dear pilgrim, being given in your name. All your friends are gathered there to lift you up. Come and taste your sweet reward, nothing less and nothing more. In the end, you will get what you love.
Rick Clark is a producer, multi-instrumentalist, writer, and music supervisor, and he's had quite a life with music and creativity. Rick, again, thank you so much for being here.
Man, it's my pleasure.
Really happy. Thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced and directed by Mary Mancini. Our technical director and board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. The conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Hit us up on Instagram. Tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. You can also leave us a message at 615-751-2500, but we can and probably will use your message on the air someday. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekalona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.
In the end, you will get what you love. Through the mist beyond the shadow comes a voice that stirs the soul. It says